Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate each and every one of you that are watching on a regular basis. We've been getting a lot of great comments and great feedback from people who are watching. That's what really gets me motivated to continue to do these. It's all about helping each other try to catch more fish. I feel like there's a lot of good content out there to watch on YouTube, a lot of entertaining content. I know that I'm not the most glitzy and glamorous channel out there. I would love to get to the point where I have a lot of cool editing and a lot of cool photography mixed in. But at this point, guys, I don't have that ability to do it. I don't have the time to do that. And I would love to get there. So hopefully we do get there at some point. But right now, I'm just concentrating on trying to share my knowledge, my experiences with you guys, and receive some of that back from you so that I can grow as well. And that's what's been happening. So I'm really enjoying doing this. I hope you guys are enjoying the channel. If you have topics that you would like me to talk about, please put that in the comment section. If you have comments, both positive and negative, feedback on the videos, feel free to put anything in the comment section. I do read everyone. I try to respond to them all. And that's what energizes me to continue doing these. So today's topic has to do with a bunch of the comments that I've gotten since I started this channel. And that really is about fishing line. And specifically, it's the braided versus fluorocarbon line, debate that's out there. A lot of people want to know, which line do you think is better? Is braided, better than fluorocarbon? And, for me, it doesn't have to do with, is one better than the other? If I could only choose one line, is there one I would choose over the other? Yeah, there is one that I would choose, but I really truly believe that at this point, for anglers that are out there, it is a tool, and that's what it is meant to be. I mean, it's not just the difference between braid and fluorocarbon and monofilament. It's the difference between pound tests of every one of those. It determines the action of a rod, or it changes the action of a rod based on what line, what pound test you choose. There's so many variables that go into it that it really is, it's almost frustrating when I hear the comments, where people are so set on just one line over another, because it's really meant to be a tool. And like all tools, if you don't utilize them correctly, you're not going to get the full function out of that tool. So I'll chime in on this, but just keep in mind that, as a tool, line is different for everybody. If you love braid, but you're using, a very moderate speed rod, maybe a composite rod or a fiberglass rod, you're like, well, it's what helps me feel the bait because it's so sensitive. Well, it helps you a lot better than if you had an extra fast, high modulus graphite rod. You may have too much sensitivity with that, so you don't want to use braid. So it really comes down to the equipment that you're using, and an angler needs to be aware of that. But if you're talking strictly about braid, to me, braid has a lot of advantages. It's basically zero stretch, it's super sensitive, and it is absolutely wonderful for fishing around grass because of its ability to cut through the weed. Those are advantages over any of the other line options that we have out there. So for me, braid is really what I will utilize 100% of the time if I'm frogging, if I'm flipping heavy mats. And really, those are the only two times that I only use braid. Now, on a lot of my spinning equipment, I will use braid as a main line, and then I'll put a fluorocarbon leader onto it. So it's a mix, it's a hybrid, right? You want to obtain all the benefits out of braid as well as all the benefits out of fluorocarbon. So that's a great kind of compromise between the two. If you're throwing fluorocarbon, you've got the low stretch, that is a huge factor. The sensitivity is still good. Not quite as good as Braid, but it's still good. And then you've also got the fact that it's a good solid line that's abrasion resistant. And when it comes to coming through weed and wood, it's still a very good line. It is what it is. It's a good solid line, and it's clear. So you do, have the invisibility feature out of it. When you look at, so for me, when I'm using fluorocarbon, the majority of the time I'm using fluorocarbon. So if I'm throwing spinner baits, swim jigs, crankbaits, jerk baits, most Texas rigs, if I'm dragging things on the bottom, football head jigs, that I'm using fluorocarbon. I'm using fluorocarbon with my swim baits. And like I said, most of my spinning rods have a Braid main line, but then I tie on a fluorocarbon leader onto it. And I'll use straight fluorocarbon if I'm throwing jerk baits, or a lot of times if I'm throwing swim baits too, I'll throw straight fluorocarbon. So the majority of the time I'm throwing fluorocarbon on most of my rods. The only time I throw monofilament is if I'm throwing topwater baits. I will use monofilament for that because I want low stretch or a high stretch, because I'm visually seeing the strikes, and I want to make sure that the fish gets the bait and I'm not pulling it away from the fish. And that leads me to the negatives of Braid. I mean, really, anytime you're using Braid, you've got that sensitivity factor where you have too much sensitivity, and you're ripping the bait away from the fish before the fish is truly engulfed that bait. So I think you miss a lot of fish. I think you miss a lot of fish because when the fish comes up to strike it and they suck that bait in, they're not getting the bait in their mouth because there's no stretch to allow that bait to be pulled into their mouth. So I think you miss a lot of bites when you're throwing Braid. Another issue I think with Braid is, because there's no stretch, you set the hook, you can tear a pretty big hole in the fish's mouth. And when that happens, you've got a much easier chance of that bait coming through. I think that's one of the biggest reasons we lose fish when we're flipping heavy mats. You're really yanking on that fish so much that you've created a pretty good hole in the fish's mouth. And as soon as there's a little bit of slack, that heavy weight bops that hook right back out of the hole. So I think that's another negative of Braid, is you've got the potential to rip bigger holes in the fish's mouth. Another thing that drives me crazy about Braid is if you're flipping wood, a lot of times that feature that we love about Braid with grass and its ability to cut through the grass is the same negative with wood. It will saw right into a branch and just get you stuck routinely in wood. So it's a negative in that manner. Other issues that can both be a positive and negative with Braid is the fact that it does float. So if you're frogging, that's great because your line is staying on top of the weeds. If you're fishing around weeds, your line is above the weeds. But if you want your bait to dive, you're not going to get the same diving depth by using Braid because it's going to pull your bait up to the surface. So it's not necessarily a bait, or a line that I'd want to use with, say, a crankbait or some sort of diving bait. It's really, you can't just say, is one line better than the other, because it's a tool. You use the tool in a manner that fits, whatever it is that you're doing and the techniques that you're utilizing. So if I had to answer this question, I think fluorocarbon is a much better all-purpose line. I think the fact that it's invisible, it has most of the benefits of Braid, just not quite to the maximizing point that Braid has. So you've still got low stretch, you've got increased sensitivity, and the fact that it's clear, and personally that it sinks, is generally going to be better for most baits. And if I had to choose, I'd take fluorocarbon in a heartbeat over Braid. In fact, I really don't use Braid that much. If I can use a chatterbait and I can make it work with fluorocarbon, I'm going to use the fluorocarbon over the Braid, and it just has to do with the number of bites. I truly believe that the invisibility factor of fluorocarbon and the Braid and the thickness of Braid really does increase the bites for fluorocarbon and decrease the bites for braided line. So, you know, I am in that camp where I think braid limits the number of bites that you get, but there are definitely times and advantages to braid. So that's my input, guys. I've had a lot of people ask for it, so I'm sharing it. But ultimately, what I want you to walk away from with this video is that all different lines have specific circumstances and instances when you should use them over a different brand or a different line type. You can't just say I'm going to pick one and think it's better across the board in every category, because it's not going to be that way. You've got definite line choices you should be using for different techniques, and then you want to match it with the correct rod and reel, and there's a whole bunch of different things that go into it. But in summary, I think fluorocarbon is a better way to go for most techniques. So I hope this was helpful, guys. I hope it answered your question. I'm sure there's some out there right now that are like, he doesn't know what he's talking about. And guys, I'm going to end this by saying what I always say. Stick to what you have confidence in, because confidence is 50% of fishing. And if you're using what you feel good about, you're going to generate the bites, and it's working for you, so stick with it. But I'm going to stick with fluorocarbon because that's what I like most of the time. So I hope it was helpful. If it was, hit the like button, share it on your social media, and stay tuned for tomorrow's tip. Thanks for watching.